let's dive in. So today's webinar, the topic is personal finance simulations. This is part 2 of a two-part series. We covered about 6 different simulations in part 1 last month, and it's exciting, to be back with you today to talk about 6 more simulations. So there's a handout with links that's available. I shared that link to everybody a few minutes ago, but if you need it again, please, I'll just make sure, I'm not sure, Kevin, if you can drop that in the link, that would be awesome, or over in the chat. But we've got lots of information and links to all of the ones that we're going to be doing. So in part 1, that's on our website and available in the archive. You can go back and check that out. We talked about Budget Challenge, Stash, Intuit's Mint and TurboTax simulations, as well as Claim Your Future and the reality check from Jumpstart. So all 6 of those are fantastic simulations, and I hope if you were on with us for that session that you've been able to go back and sort of check in on some of those and see what those are all about. Today, we're talking about 6 different ones. So again, I had to kind of pick and choose to figure out which ones we were going to discuss on these webinars, and these are the ones that I landed on. There are more, certainly, but these are the ones that sort of rose up to the top. And a lot of the ones that we're talking about today involve investing, or a strong investing component, really all of them except for spent, which is the last one that we'll get to, which is really more of a game. It's like a one sitting kind of thing. The rest of these are all more longer duration types of simulations. So with that, hold tight because I got a lot to cover. So again, access that handout if you'd like, make a copy of it and type up your own notes, or just sit back and see what we have to talk about. That handout, by the way, will be up on our website in a day or two, is a PDF, so you can grab it there as well later on. So as I mentioned last time, there's a lot of different uses for simulations, certainly an opportunity to provide hands-on learning, which is really, I think, some of the most important components of this learn by doing. In some of these cases, especially when we talk about investing, I want to talk and discuss a little bit with that as sort of the learn by doing. In some cases, also what not to do, like to be able to think back and reflect on how you might do things a little bit differently if this was your own money, like if this was your own hard-earned cash, right? So there's lots of different simulations like the ones that we talked about last time, and this on all sorts of different topics. So let's dive in. First one that we're covering today is the stock market game. And so the stock market game has been around for many, many years. It is actually a program that I worked with years ago when I first moved to Pennsylvania, and worked with an organization that was then called Economics PA. They were the provider of the stock market game. Back then, the stock market game was all still done in pencil and paper with bubbles and things sent in by paper every week. So if you've been around long enough to remember that, then you've been around and doing this for a while. Obviously, that doesn't happen anymore. Everything's online. So and like many others, the stock market game has also evolved along those lines. So the stock market game is provided and a program of the SIFMA Foundation, which stands for the Securities Industries and Financial Markets Association. They're based in New York, and they are the foundation arm of SIFMA. So they are a 501c 501c3 not-for-profit. And they partner here in Pennsylvania with the Pennsylvania Free Enterprise Week, which some of you might be familiar with for sending students to during the summer. Fantastic opportunity for high school students. So the basic premise of the stock market game hasn't changed much over the years. It's really been pretty consistent in that students receive a virtual $100,000 portfolio, and they can invest that in stocks and mutual funds. This program is offered for grades 4 through 12 with competitive regions and divisions. So there are regions, geographic regions within Pennsylvania, and then grade level divisions. So starting at 4 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 through 12. One of the things that is sort of a significant component of the stock market game is that they stress the use of teams. So teams of 3 to 5 students. There's an accompanying app that goes along with it, and a very comprehensive teacher support center. And I'm going to show you a little bit of behind the scenes with these. So, here's, for example, this is what this would look like, a version of it if you were in the app. For the sake of all of our eyes, we're going to be focusing in on what this would look like if you were on a big screen as we go through these. The stock market game is one of the programs that does have a per student or per team cost. So that is currently $20 per team of 3 to 5 students for the fall or spring or enrichment sessions, $30 if you do the year-long session. So if you have like a year-long course and wanted to run it the entire time. It is free right now for all Title I schools in Pennsylvania through sponsorships. It's also free for teachers to prepare and to compete alongside their students. So I provided with you Jeremy Croft's contact information. He's fantastic. If you have questions, one of the things I love about the stock market game program is that there's somebody in each state that supports teachers and educators in that state. And he's great to work with and can answer questions and does teacher training and what have you for Pennsylvania educators that's specific to the stock market game. So again, I mentioned these earlier, but there are competitive divisions. The goal in the stock market game is to build or is to increase your portfolio value and come out on top, right? So there are rankings throughout the game that compare how students are doing against their peers and other teams. And it's been interesting because the stock market game, as I said, has been around for a long time. And there's been some research in the past that showed that students that participated in the stock market game did better than comparative peers in assessments of financial literacy. And one of the things that they attribute it to is the excitement that the competition brings for students. It gets them really engaged and interested in this. And I know there's a number of folks. There was a op-ed a little while ago about how these simulations are bad. We shouldn't be encouraging students to try and compete for the highest portfolio value. That's teaching bad investment habits. And to that, I'd say it sure can. If that's how you do it, right? So, one of the things that I think is always important when you're trying to encourage students to do this as a game, to do this as a competition, is to really reflect and say, okay, what strategies did I use in the game, and what would I do differently if this was my own money, right? So, the great part of this is it is fictional cash, right? So the portfolio value is going to go up or down. They're taking a lot of risk, a lot more risk in most cases, because there's a short window in which that they are, looking at making gains. And so that offers a lot of ways to really, draw comparisons and to say, okay, so this is what I did in this situation. Would I ever want to do, have this same approach with my own funds? So anyhow, all of that said, and that really applies to pretty much all of the stock simulations that we're talking about, not just this one. This really is sort of, a critique of a lot of them and an opportunity, I think, as educators to make sure that we use them in a way that's appropriate. So as I mentioned, they have a variety of different competition windows. These are for 2022, obviously, 21, 22, obviously new ones will be coming out for the upcoming school year. So this is just a look behind the scenes at what you would find with the teacher resource or support center. There's a great start here option that walks you through things. You can find events, all sorts of essentials, view all your team portfolios. We'll talk a little bit more about some of these other programs, and then additional curricula that's available to support your use of the program. So I mentioned that teams are a big part, and this is really the only program that really not supports, but really pushes the whole notion of doing this as a team. By the way, I think that has incredible value, especially as individuals might think about the fact that someday they may need to try and come to terms with investing or finding some agreement with investing with a partner down the road, a spouse or what have you. Um, Lots of times people come together in a relationship and they don't necessarily have the same risk tolerance, for example, or they might be interested in different things. And so this also offers an opportunity for students to sort of, come together, each person doing different research, and saying, okay, well, what are we comfortable with doing? What strategy would we like to come up with? So um, their student portfolios, again, a lot of these are very similar depending on which kind of a stock market simulation you're in, but the value of your stocks, where you are, what your ranking is. For example, this is a test account, so this is just going to provide sort of dummy information, or just older archived information. But this is a list of transaction notes, so you can see what this team has done. This is an example of the stock trade. One of the things that I really like about the stock market game is that all of this is very simple. There's not a ton of bells and whistles. It's one of the things that makes it very much usable for those younger grades, students in grades 4 to 5. The platform is all the same, but it's not so complex that there's just lots of things to overwhelm students. It's pretty basic in terms of put in the ticker symbol if you need to. You can look it up. Are you doing a buy, a sell, a short sell, or a short cover? What type of order are you putting it in? Are you trying to get it, timed for whatever the market is doing, or do you have a limit of how much you're willing to spend, number of shares, and the limit price if it is a limit order? So, kind of basic in that respects, but just very clean and easy for students to grasp. Here's a look at account holdings. So this also, depending on how the portfolio is invested, would look different, but this right now shows that in this portfolio about 72% of the funds are currently invested in stocks. So again, over in the Teacher Support Center, there are resources for you to provide to students. So here, for example, is that push for team roles. So what each student might be tasked with, especially important, I think, if you're dealing with students who need a little bit more structure and working with teams. I love that they have a pre-assessment or an assessment to make sure that students understand what the rules of the game are, so that you can tell and know if your students are going into it fully informed. There's a bunch of different mini lessons. These are things that students can go in and watch. You can assign some of them to students or do them together in class. These are all quite short. I think the longest of these is no more than 5.5 minutes. And some of these, are sort of more advanced topics. You wouldn't need to do all of them right up front. And again, whether or not you do these with students or, have students pick up this information in another format is totally up to you. At each of the grade levels, there are what they refer to as program units. So understanding the stock market game, what you need to know before you invest, so things like what's a company, what's a stock, identifying ticker symbols, selecting your investments, tracking your investments, and then reflection. And so you'll see that these are the same 5 units at all 3 grade levels, but the resources would be a little bit different. Here you can also search for different resources. So whether that's by grade level or by the subject area that you teach or by those units. Here's an example of some of the assessments that are available. So you can do a pre and a post test to see what your students knew going into it and what they came away with. As I mentioned before, there are other components of our programs that are affiliated with the stock market game. InvestRight is available for students that are participating in the stock market game and is an essay contest. It is a phenomenal opportunity. It is, again, a competitive situation where students submit their essays to the competition. You can choose which ones get entered, and there are prizes both for the winning student and the winning teacher. And each time there's different prompts, and there's a whole set of national or a national panel of judges. I've had the opportunity to serve as a judge in the past. It's always interesting to see what students come forward with. Because this is a program of SIFMA, the Securities Industries and Financial Markets Association, they obviously have a huge tie with all sorts of different investment and financial industry experts. And so a great opportunity to connect with volunteers and have volunteers come in and talk to your classroom. Like most of these programs, a lot of the information and a lot of their videos in particular are available without having to get logged in. So you can go in and kind of take a preview without doing much of anything, giving anybody your email address or what have you. So here's an example of some of the videos that are on the Stock Market Games YouTube channel. All right, so number 2 on our list, Mimic Personal Finance. So Mimic is from Stukent, Stukent, and this was actually, if I'm correct in saying this, Brian Bean, who developed Mimic Personal Finance, is a former classroom teacher. He works for Stukent now. Stukent sort of bought out Mimic Personal Finance, or this simulation, which became part of Stukent and the Mimic series. So they have tons of different simulations, things that are available, a number of them at the high school, even more at the college level, that are all related to different areas of business, everything from social media and marketing and all sorts of stuff. This is one that does have a cost to it. It can vary from school to school, so you really have to get in touch with them to request a quote. It will depend on how many students there are in the school, how many students would be using it, if your school is in a low income or in a rural area. So it's kind of hard to tell you exactly how much it would cost you without having some of those details. But if it's something that you're interested in after this, I would encourage you to reach out. You can get a free instructor demo access. So right here on that page, and this is the link in the handout, it says get a free instructor access. That gives you sort of a behind the scenes and gives you, full access to what's in the program for a period of time, including all of the curriculum that's available. So one of the things that's sort of unique to this one from the ones that we're talking about today, but reminiscent of STASH that we talked about last time, is that you can tie things like academic performance and in-class behavior to the simulation. So this is kind of similar to some of the other sort of classroom economy types of simulations, where, for example, their housing in this case for their budget is their desk. And there's actually, and I'll show you in a minute, sort of this map of the classroom, the mock-up that they've suggested might have, higher sections, or certain sections might have a higher cost. So that's a little bit different from some of the other ones we're talking about today, but is again sort of reminiscent of one of the ones we talked about last time. So let's see if you can hear the audio on this. If you can't, please let me know ASAP.
Introducing the new and improved Mimic Personal Finance, the only personal finance simulation that lets students practice decision-based learning and face real outcomes for their financial choices. This simulation goes beyond gamification and realifies the student's experience by allowing them to purchase classroom perks like using their cell phones or sitting at a preferred desk. They can even buy their grades. By applying budgeting skills, students regularly purchase their Mimic Personal Finance scores that can then be factored in as part of their total grades in class. This unique aspect of the simulation creates a real sense of opportunity cost for every financial decision, and students love it. As part of the simulation, students manage budgets and pay bills, develop credit scores, acquire liabilities and assets, start businesses and take on jobs, invest in the stock market, experience unexpected events that affect their finances. Mimic Personal Finance now provides exciting new features. For the first time, students can see the jobs they're hired for and their associated responsibilities. Apply for jobs and review filled and open positions all in one place. Mimic Personal Finance now walks you through a step-by-step process for setting up and customizing your course. On top of that, the new grading system allows you to combine all scoring metrics in the simulation into one comprehensive grade. This helps students easily see how metrics such as credit scores or points purchased factored into their simulation grades and clearly identify how their performance produced the scores they received. Give your students a safe space to practice making important financial decisions. Fill out the form on this page to get free access to Mimic Personal Finance and see the new features for yourself. Introduce.
So this is the only one that I'm aware of that really has that grading component, which I think is really neat and something that I know is of interest to some students. And it's I think sort of an interesting and different approach that this one has that others don't. So one of the things that I think I would strongly encourage you to do is to get the access with that's available and give it a test drive. One of the things that is, I think, probably both an incredible advantage to this program as well as could be perceived as maybe a drawback, at least at the beginning, is there's a lot of ability to customize the course that you have and what students have access to. And so the setup time takes a little bit and really understanding what you want students to be able to do or not do. But the one thing that I will say is there is a video for every single step of the way. So if you're going to do this with your students, I think it's one of those types of programs where it's going to take some upfront preparation to make sure that you get things set up the way that you want them to. But there's all sorts of support there to help you, really walk you through the process. My hunch is that if you were to use this, probably by the second or third time that you've been through it, you know exactly what you want to do, but there's a bit of a sort of an on-ramp there. So here's an example. You're setting things up. You have the ability to create your own life happens kinds of scenarios. Plus, there's a bunch of ones that are already there as part of the template. You can create start and end dates. You can choose what features students are going to have, whether or not you want them to be enabled or not, how you want to handle enrollment, what have you. There are videos, as I said, that are incredibly valuable, not just for the educator, but also for the students. So this walks students through what to expect with the student portal so that you don't have to do all of that work for you. And you can assign students to view these and do these pieces on their own. Here's an example of the budget equation is what they call it. So you look at your paycheck, your monthly gross withholdings, taxes, your net income, your automatic withdrawal for living expenses, available funds to budget. And they require that you put some money towards a down payment, emergency funds, and savings. And so these are available and sort of tracked as you go through the simulation, how much money you have in checking and savings, credit cards, stock values, et cetera, assets and liabilities, including, for example, a student loan. And again, you can customize what students have or don't have as you set this up. Their academic grade in the simulation, their credit score, their spending analysis, what have you. So all of this, continues to fluctuate through the game. Students pay different bills. They have fixed bills and variable bills, as well as some one-timers. The stocks that students are offered in this are all virtual or fictional stocks. So this is not a live stock market simulation. The investments here are in, like for example, SPM stock is supermarket stock, right? Or some others that are kind of plays on perhaps actual ones like Swoosh Athletics or CDS, the corner drugstore. So these have some built-in fluctuations in their price, but again, not an emphasis in this on researching stocks. The simulation is really just that. These are completely fictional. So here's an example of an earning statement. Here's options that a user would have to go in and purchase things at the shopping mall. Here are the houses that are for sale. So these are their desks. the healthcare marketplace. So looking at plans, the bronze, the gold, the silver, in terms of what their health insurance is going to be, different events, life happens kinds of things. And as I said, there's a ton of resources. So look at all these different videos that you can watch. There's a complete curriculum that accompanies this. So units 1 through 13. You can pick and choose how much of this you want to do, or how you want to engage with it, either using this as the basis for a class or sort of putting this over top of another course. So here's an example. This is from Unit 6 on the logistics of renting. And here's an example that they give of how you might categorize your, give your desks an address, right? And so some of them will have a higher cost, and many of them come with different slides. So here's an example of content types of information. Okay, so flying through, like I said. So the next ones that we're going to talk about are actually these 3 up top: Personal Finance Lab, How the Market Works, and Wall Street Survivor are all from the same company. So I mentioned before that the stock market game is from SIFMA, which is a nonprofit organization affiliated with their association foundation. The Student is a for-profit organization as well as Stock Track. So if that matters to you or not, these are, kind of treat them like publishers, if you will. This is a simulation provider that has put together a variety of different stock market simulations. As you can see, there's others, but we're going to focus on these 3 and talk about how each one of them is a little bit different. So this gives an example of some of their 4 sort of most popular ones for students. So Wall Street Survivor, we're going to talk about this one last, and How the Market Works are both, you'll notice, completely free and supported by advertising. And I'll show you some examples of that when we look at that. You'll see both of those are free $100,000 practice portfolios. So those are very similar to the stock market game. How the market works is also similar to the stock market game, and that you can trade US stocks as well as mutual funds. In Wall Street Survivor, you're only trading stocks and options. All of these have a whole host of research tools. These are considered sort of basic research tools. I would consider these to have more sort of more advanced research tools, and they're mentioned down here at the bottom. There are contests associated with all these. Stock Track really is more focused on universities. So really you're looking at these 3, and that's why I chose to focus in on the 3 of these. So let's look at the first of these, Personal Finance Labs. So this is sort of has 2 major components. One is a budgeting game, and the other is an investing simulation. And it has both state and national contests. There's an ability to integrate different lessons and assessments right into the simulation. So I think that's a really neat feature. And as I mentioned before, there's a lot of in-depth stock research that students can do within the platform, so they never have to leave to do that. This one also offers a free Instructor Demo access, so you can participate in that and really get a great feel for what's involved. This typically, if you live somewhere else, would have a charge to it, but it is free at this point to schools in Pennsylvania through the Pennsylvania Council on Financial Literacy. So if you wanted to sign your students up, you're going to go through PCFL, or the Pennsylvania Council on Financial Literacy, to do that. They also offer professional development similar to what PFEW does for the stock market game. And then they also have some additional contests and divisions and what have you that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. So this is what it looks like when you get logged in. The budget game has an opportunity for students to build and maintain a budget over time, set and hit savings goals, use a credit card, and build their quality of life. It takes it happens over the course of a number of months, and each of those months takes about 10 to 20 minutes to play. Games save automatically, so you can come back. So you have an opportunity to go through and do these. It these, are sort of like at your own pace. So you can go through this relatively quickly. So if you wanted students to do, say, a month at a time, and do them on certain days, the first one will take a little bit longer because students are learning how it works. But the whole premise is that you're a college student, just started your first part-time job. There's a roll of the dice in all of these, so that makes it a little bit more varied. So students that are sitting next to each other, for example, can have different scenarios, different things that happen to them. It won't be the same for every student. And this is sort of, what it looks like as they get going. They go through the month, they get different choices. So here, for example, what TV or internet plan do they want? You can change these later as it says for a fee. And you have the opportunity then to pay those bills. The roll of the dice is what moves you ahead certain in the game. So a count of two moves you fast forwards you through one day. So it's like 12 hours at a time. It walks you through different components of these. This is liabilities, expenses, both fixed and variable. You build your budget at the start of each month. I like these because it's personalized, right? So like the pay to the order of, oh, hey, look, it's me. So this is how much I'm making. And it comes out with these, your net pay, as well as showing what the deductions are. So really nice, very realistic in a lot of sense. With this, you constantly see your sort of dashboard up top with your balances, net worth. Here's an example of a bill. Again, I like the visuals in all of this. I think they're very well done. When you have a bill that's due, you can have the choice of paying it with your debit or your credit card. So building credit over time and being able to pay those off is important. Also keeping track of what's in your account and making sure that you don't overdraw your checking account is important as well. So there's also a choice. And as they point out, if you never do anything other than work extra hours, then your quality of life score goes down. But some of these others can also have consequences as well. So maybe you socialize too much and you get a poor grade, or you don't do enough chores or what have you. So there's all sorts of different, implications. When you work and do different things, you have these chances to play these different games. I think people who play games like this online would probably do better and score better than I did. But based on how well you do, you earn a certain amount of money. So here I earned a bonus of $40. Here's, again, these like sort of life happens kinds of things. Bills, you get credit card statements. Again, your stats continue to change as you go through. You have different accounts and you can look at all of those as you go through the game. So as I mentioned before, you roll the dice. There's the morning and the evening. As you go through. When you get a bill and then it's due at a different time. So that's again, very real world and real life. As I mentioned before, you can embed different things. So you can put this pre-test right into the simulation so that students have to take these in order to keep going. So here over on the right is the budget game and how well you're doing in the budget game. And then over here in the middle then is the investment component of this. So again, here's that blown up a little bit. You can see, a rank, see some of the recent transactions that you've had, see how your quality of life is doing, how your credit score is doing, what's to have you as you move forward. And then it comes to the investment side of things. So when you, and in this one, again, there's some ability to customize some of this. So this one is $100,000. And there's different options for what you can and can't do. As I mentioned before, this one has some really nice research components to it, with some different ways that you can graph some of these different things that you can look at. It incorporates the news and media, as well as a lot of different ratios, and some really nice opportunities for charting, as well as just what the market is doing, and all sorts of other information. I like that it has some analyst ratings. That's a nice real world approach to some of these. And then you can look at the recommendation history. So again, probably one of the most in-depth research tools that are embedded into a simulation that I've seen. So this is from Personal Finance Lab with additional resources or information just on what it looks like when you're looking at this as a teacher, the ability to assign different articles, for example, or videos that are embedded that students have to watch in order to proceed. They have a bunch of different curriculum and resources that are a part of this. So lesson plans with activities and how you might go about integrating these within your classroom. Like some of the others, there are some slides, lesson plans, what have you. They have a 9-week course outline as well as other different options, so like a semester. And these are some of the examples of some of the learning components that can be incorporated right into the program, including some assessment components. So lots of different resources again. This is their typical pricing. So again, however, this is free of charge to students right now through the Pennsylvania Council on Financial Literacy. So if you wanted to do that, you would go through them and get to get registered. You can be a part of their challenges that are here in Pennsylvania. They offer different workshops, both online and in person, and they have a variety of different resources and prizes as well. There are also some local competitions depending on what county you live in. So I would encourage you to go and check out where you live because it varies by their sponsorship. This is just something that I think is cool that Stock Track also has, is they have, and these are more popular in colleges, but I know sometimes every once in a while folks have some grant money maybe that they're trying to spend at the end of the year. These have an ability to integrate market data. So I know there's some schools that teach just teach standalone investment courses, for example, and this I think would be really cool. Same with these scrolling tickers around the classroom. So these have a initial cost, and then the cost of the market data there is listed as $360 a year. So again, free test drive that you can go and take. They do have a YouTube channel where you can check these out. So from the same provider, so some of this kind of the back end is sort of similar, but this one is completely free. You don't have to go through another organization. This has the ability to completely customize your own contest. So say you don't want your students doing stuff with other students, you want them to be, right there in your classroom. You want to set up how much money they have, maybe put some different requirements on like how much they have to diversify, for example. This might be the one for you. I will caution you, however, that it is ad supported, so you'll see different ads, including at the beginning, hey, you sure you want to do this one or do you want to do the one that costs money? So again, some setup at the beginning, so you can set your own start and end times for sessions, which I think works incredibly well, especially if you're, say working with students and have, marking periods that don't align with some of these others. You can decide how much money students are going to start with as their initial cash balance. You can decide whether they can or cannot trade mutual funds, for example, or cryptocurrency, if they're allowed to short sell or not, if they're allowed to trade on margin. Are you going to require them to put notes in each time? I think that's a really cool feature. So a lot of flexibility, but again, this one is, as I mentioned, ad supported. So this allows you to set your own commission rate. So you can do it as a percentage or a flat dollar fee. You can determine how much you want your students to diversify. So for example, you can say, hey, the maximum you can have in equities is 80%. And same thing with position limits. So you can force them to have more, a variety of investments. Similar to the personal finance lab that we talked about a minute ago, you can integrate different lessons and assessments into the program. And then you can have students sign up, or you could share it to them through Google Classroom, what have you. So this is what it looks like when you get in. Again, there are ads, but again, free of charge. So similar, again, same company, Wall Street Survivor. This one is really meant for the individual. And I would say the reason I wanted to include this one isn't so much that I think it would necessarily work for you for a classroom, like to have all of your students do, but say you have a kid that's just really into this, like the kid that comes in and wants to talk about crypto, or the one that came in and was, all about whatever is happening in the market. This might be something that you encourage them to do individually, because they can go in, they can, set up their own portfolios and, really kind of go to town, right? Again, it is ad supported. You don't have to sign up for any of these free newsletters in order to get access. But they've got a lot of different information in here. But again, it is for example, when you log in, you're gonna have to X out of some of these ads. But it is, there's a other educational component. This is not one that you would assign instruction or anything through that for, but it's a good one for students that just want to go in and sort of play around, right? I like the integrated stock screener. I think this is a really neat way for students to locate and sort of narrow down different stocks that's unique to this one. So Woo, all right. By the way, any questions, or I'm going to pause here for just a second to ask if anybody who is on the line, if you have participated in any of these, used any of these in your classroom. I also want to just mention that one of the things that you might want to do, because I like going on and seeing, for example, the lists of these different organizations and seeing like which students and which teachers are winning some of these. So if you go through and you go to some of these program websites and you look at who's been participating, you may know some of those educators, or you can certainly reach out to some of them and get their own, get some of their thoughts. So something that is, just an idea. This one is spent. So find that little raise your hand button and raise your hand, or use that if you've ever used or seen this. All right, so I'm only seeing 2 of you that have used or seen spent. All right, good. So this is pretty new to most of you. So spent, a lot of you might have seen it from the NGPF, or Next Gen Personal Finance Arcade. It is listed on Next Gen's Arcade, but it was developed actually by the nonprofit organization in North Carolina, along with McKinsey, who then, because of Spent, McKinsey is the company that NGPF has hired to produce a bunch of other different short-term simulation game type resources. And so it is in the arcade, but it predates NGPF, and is a really neat tool. This is very different in its perspective. So when you log into Spent, or not, you don't log in, you just access the website. There's no login needed. You encounter this information. Over 14 million Americans are unemployed. Now imagine you're one of them. Your savings are gone, you've lost your house, and you're down to your last $1,000. Can you make it through the month? I will tell you and confess, and I'd be curious, the 2 of you who said that you've played this before, I have gone through this simulation a number of times, like over the years. I don't know, I've probably done it 10 times at least. I will confess, I have never made it through the month. I don't know what it looks like when you make it through the month. I'm sure that some people do. I've heard that it can happen. But it's a challenge. And I think it's interesting, depending on the students that you have. We talk sometimes, I don't know, is anybody here familiar with that phrase? It's used a lot in literature about mirrors or windows. So who, if anybody's familiar with the idea of mirrors or windows, let me know over in the chat. But the idea, for example, when it comes to when it's used in the context of literature, this idea that when you read a story, for example, sometimes it's like a mirror, like you see yourself in the story reflected back at you. Sometimes stories are more windows where you're looking in at and learn about a life somebody else is leading. I think that Spent is a lot like that. It's can be used as a mirror or as a window. So if you are teaching in a setting where you have a lot of students who maybe their parents have faced unemployment and they're struggling and living paycheck to paycheck, for those students, it will be a mirror, right? They'll see themselves reflected. They might see from a different perspective, that of their parents, some of the really challenging decisions that families have to make in that setting. If your students are not familiar with the idea of having to live paycheck to paycheck, this offers that window, right? A window into that life and the challenges and decisions that are present there, and hopefully builds up some empathy and some understanding of individuals that are in this scenario or in this situation. And as I mentioned, certainly 14 million Americans are unemployed. This was, a specific statistic from a certain snapshot in time. But if we put that into context, that's every man, woman, and child, plus some in Pennsylvania, right? The population of Pennsylvania is a little over, roughly around 13 million. So this is the entire state of Pennsylvania, basically, plus some. So and one of the things that I think is interesting, so as I mentioned, this comes from Urban Ministries of Durham. That's the nonprofit organization that's focused on housing support and helping individuals that are facing financial challenges in Durham, North Carolina, and was built with McKinney. And again, this premise, you've lost your job, you're down to your last $1,000. Can you make it through the month? It is a short single setting. I would encourage you to maybe think about having students run it more than once. And one of the things I love about it is it incorporates additional information. So it puts things into context. I would dare say the challenge of this, and I think what sometimes frustrates students, and it's supposed to, is that there's often no good answer. There's no good choice. Or maybe there's the choice that makes the most financial sense, but there's a choice that a lot of these choices have, you know, are sort of those where it really tugs at the heartstrings, and students have to really think. So at the beginning, they get offered a couple of different jobs, as you might imagine. All of them kind of come with sort of pros and cons. You start out with your initial balance of $1,000. You're on day one trying to see if you can make it through the month. You get job strikes depending on what happens. You have some opportunities to access additional cash if you so choose. I'll expand and show you at least that top one here in a minute. So I, for the purposes of this and pulling some screenshots, chose the option to wait tables. So basically hope that I'll earn $8 an hour. Oh, and I have to buy my uniform. So looking at what this is going to cost me, I will net $262 in weekly pay. So $1,000.48 a month breaks down to $262 a week. Then you're presented with all sorts of different questions. So for example, the Affordable Care Act requires you get health insurance. The good news, your child's covered by the state. The bad, you aren't. So which plan do you want? Do you want the gold plan, $462 a month and a $10 copay? The silver plan at $437 a month and $75 copay, or the bronze plan at $303 a month and an $80 copay. Obviously, at some point, many students or many users are going to encounter something that's going to go wrong, and they're going to have a medical expense, right? And the choice that you made here in terms of what your copay is going to play a factor. The other components of this, though, is, it's going to be a different monthly payment. So you have choices about things like where to live. This one I think is really cool because it's a slider where you go back and forth, and it changes the costs here. So your rent is highest if you're closest to the city. It's lowest if you go further out. But as you slide that and go further out, as your rent decreases, your travel cost increases. So they put the two of them together, which I think is really nice. So here's an example of what comes when I ended up right here, sort of in the middle. You chose to live farther away from your job, so your rent is lower, but your gas costs are higher. In fact, for every dollar a working family saves on housing, they spend an additional 77 cents on transportation. So you're looking at what, a net savings, right, of 23 cents. So that's like I said before, it integrates these educational or informational types of pieces. Life throws curveballs, and so does a kid on your block. He shattered your window, and your landlord insists you pay $100 to fix it. What do you do? So which would you pick? Tell me over in the chat. Would you pay the $100 to replace it? Would you put up some plastic for $5, or would you get legal help? Curious what folks would do. So I will confess that in this case, I said I would just buy some plastic and put it over the broken window because I didn't want to use all of my money, even though right now, after this, or at this point, if you look at where I have a balance of $328. And I just couldn't imagine at that point, when all I have is $328, spending $100 to fix that window. And you'll see I am at day 5. So I certainly got a lot of time left to go. Great. So somebody commented, I would fix it and seek reimbursement from my insurance or the kid who broke the window. Yeah. It would be interesting to see, like, as you go through the simulation, not everybody gets all the same ones, but to see what some of the different options are, what comes about if you make different decisions. Oh, this is awesome. Fred, thank you. Fred saying he strongly recommends this simulation. My students found it to be very engaging. It offers a whole new perspective to the financial challenges and difficult decisions people face. My students were often frustrated in a good way and were eager to try the simulation again after going broke. Kathleen, I love it. Depends on where the window is. Yeah, if it's your bedroom window or the bathroom window, maybe you'd be more willing to spend the money to get it fixed and not have it covered with plastic, or if it's downstairs and a security risk. So yeah, lots of things to think about. And I would hope that, and I think this is interesting because you have some choices if you were to do this in class. Like, would you have your students do this individually and just make their own decisions? Would you put them in pairs, maybe, or small groups, and have them talk through and try and reach consensus over which decision to make? So different ways that you can do this with your students. Your kid has a friend over. When you hear the telltale sound of the ice cream truck, they both run over to the truck. What do you want to do? Do you buy some ice cream for $5, or do you say no? There's another one that I didn't capture in this one earlier that was about your child qualifies for free and reduced lunch, but they're asking to be able to pack because they feel like they're sort of singled out for, and they don't want to eat the free lunch. And so just, lots of different pieces here that I think really, again, sort of tug at those heartstrings and hopefully build some empathy in students. Money may be tight, but you have to eat. Remember, these groceries need to last you a few weeks. And so as you scroll over each of these, and it tells you, you can get, I think it's a 4-pack of ramen noodles for $1, or you can spend $4 or whatever it is on fresh carrots. There's all different, pieces here, some basic necessities like paper towels and toilet paper, what have you. So you pick what you want, total it up, and pay. And again, you can see now here I was down to $150 and I'm at day 14. This was just again, these informational pieces. Each year, almost 15% of American households had a hard time getting enough to eat at some point. Your income level qualifies you for food stamps. What do you want to do? I said, yeah, let's apply. The good news is that you've been approved for benefits. The bad news, they don't begin until next month. And that's, something that I think a lot of folks don't realize. A lot of times, yes, there may be different programs that are available. Doesn't mean that they start tomorrow or yesterday. And so again, building that empathy and what have you. These are options. So you can smash your kid's piggy bank and get $16. This one's a plasma donation, that's 25, or a payday loan, or some other opportunities. So for example, here at this point, I've also had to deal with a tooth emergency and some other things. And it shows I ran out of money on day 25. So this was built as a way to try and drive awareness, and also built funds for this organization. And they've made a bunch of money by people playing spent and donating at the end of it, which I think is really cool. If you access this through the NGPF arcade, you will find that there is a worksheet that goes along with this for student reflection. There's also a teacher tip video that you can watch, as well as a Spanish version of this reflection. So you can have students play it. There's an opportunity for them to reflect before they begin on how they felt about that, and then sort of some of the things that they experienced in the game, and provide some feedback. There's lots more. There's lots of other stuff out there in terms of simulations. These are some of like the shorter version ones. Some of these are available on the NGPF arcade. This Adventures in Money Management actually comes from CFPB. So I just wanted to remind you that this is by no means all of the simulations. We spent 2 webinars now just providing a quick overview. There's lots of other ones out there, but I wanted to share with you some of the ones that are sort of the most popular. So we managed to time that well. I've got 3 minutes to spare. So thank you for participating. I hope that you found something interesting that you can take away from this and put to use in your classrooms.